Spectacular, so there has been plenty of things to do. In fact, last Friday was quite eventful. It was just boom, 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 boom. So if you happen to be joining us, please let us know or let me know. And you can write that in the chat or right there under the post. So whether you are in Twitch or Facebook or YouTube, you are able to share a comment and I will see it and we will be able to have a wonderful conversation together. So anyone there? Ah, yes, Jim. Yes, you are here. Yes. Wonderful to see you, or at least see your words and representation of you. It's been exciting. Last Friday, May 1st, so May Day, we had our test run for Story Crossroads. Now, in a way, just by me doing this is a test run, just so that I'm a little bit more comfortable with things. But I'm actually not the videographer. Well, I always find it a good idea for me to have at least some lingo, some idea of what may be going on. And we had to plan how we could have more than one camera feed. So on Monday nights, I just have one camera feed. Ah, and yes, from Facebook, we have David Sharp joining us. Nice to have you. You were there, so you know how exciting it was, or at least the waiting. There's a lot of waiting when it comes to a test run. Oh, I sound a little soft. Ah, well, I can fix that, absolutely. So let me do that. Okay, is that a little bit better, Jim? Because you know best if it sounds a little bit better. Okay, I turned it up, so it should work. If not, let me know. Ah, much better. I love it when it says much better. Perfect, thank you. Now, we were testing out having 3 cameras, and with 2 focusing on our performers and 1 for American Sign Language. But the tricky part with everyone isolated and you don't really get together too often is that some of these things you would test out before a test run. And there's been a lot of back and forth between myself and our, you might say, head videographer. He's actually been with us from the beginning of Story Crossroads. And his name is, drumroll please, is Sterling Elliott. Amazing. I really appreciate all that he has done. And what I also love is that how much attention that he puts to things, and even if it's a little bit of a new world for him. He's been in videography for quite a while now. He graduated with a film degree at Brigham Young University, and he has reached out to other people who have those skills, and we had a team at our home. But there was a rule, because they had to have masks. Everyone had to have masks. May 1st, at least in Utah, was the very first day where it was a little bit more opened up. And not to say that we can't be careful. We can definitely be careful even when things are opening up. And I had said, I need them to have masks. And I was double checking and found out that we had a couple people who didn't have masks. I said, well, I can't have them come in my home without a mask. And thankfully, Sterling's mom actually was able to make masks that night so that the ones that didn't have masks were able to have them. And we also had that of our performers. And David Sharp was here. He can attest to that. Isn't that right? You can always type something if you'd like about wearing a mask. That's usually not what's required when you go to a rehearsal or test run. And it's interesting just going out and driving, not that I do that too often, but going out and driving, I can see a lot more people wearing masks. And it's just kind of strange how that is. So that's what had to happen in my home. And even before people arrived, I was cleaning like crazy. And of course, my kids got to be roped into it as well. They were rewarded. It's okay. You don't have to feel bad for them. Yes. And like David said, it was different. It was just very different. And maybe explain what you mean by different. I definitely, from my perspective, can share how it's different. Usually, you're not waiting a lot for the tech. And anytime you have streaming, there's so much tech. And we found out we had one computer that we were running to test this out, and we really actually need two computers. Luckily, I have a desktop and a laptop, and so we have that solved for our next test run, which will be this Friday on May 8th. So somewhere between 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., probably closer to 7:30 p.m., we will be able to test it out again and make sure that we can have the cameras being able to have the split screen for American Sign Language and also have it in sync with video and sound. That's what we found was really tricky, was they needed to be in sync. And the more pieces you have, it's harder. If it's just the one, like right now I have the one, and I'm assuming right now that I'm pretty much in sync, that my words and my actions are going hand in hand. And Jim and David, you definitely can tell me if that's happening right now, because I only have one camera and one sound. So I'm kind of waiting to see what they say. I'm guessing I'm in sync. And we discovered that some of the equipment wasn't really working to what we wanted to do. They still could do their job, but still, we needed something that we could count on. Luckily, one of the videographers that Sterling had brought out knew someone who does a lot of live streaming. So because of that, we will have this equipment already ready to go for this Friday as well as for our festival for May 13th. And yes, it was definitely during the day itself, May 1st, there was some off sync there. It was, I think, the sound that was ahead of the actions, if I remember correctly. And Jim, he actually was helping to watch on Twitch, so he was more aware of what was happening with lag time. And then we actually had other board members of Story Crossroads who were helping with other platforms. So we had one that was helping with YouTube, and we had another that was helping with Facebook. And I had my mask on the whole time. I was way in the back, and luckily I have a spacious place that we could have some space. It's a little tricky still, but sometimes we had to pause, and if someone had to wash their hands, we had to kind of step back and make sure everyone had enough space. All right. Do you need a little bit more better sound? You said the sound is ahead of my head. Sometimes you never know how things are going to match up in the end anyway. So it's lagging even right now. Not just the test day on May 1st, it's lagging right now. I'm just testing. Because I'm hearing lag, and I don't know if this is about May 1st or this is today. I'm still off sync. Oh no. Well, I'm not quite sure how to fix that with my laptop. I know how to play with the volume, so I've been learning those kinds of things. I've learned about scenes in OBS. But when we had our time together, we had the washing of the hands, we had paper towels, we had that all ready to go. We did have a rule that if someone did need to use the restroom, that they would need to wipe it down and disinfect, but at least when it came to our test run, that was not needed, so that was lovely. And we also tried to space things ahead of time to kind of give an idea about where maybe people could go. But every so often, if you suddenly had something in a bag and you put it down, it gets tricky when you have to go back. All right, so right now, I guess I'm not even being in sync right now, but I have no idea how to fix that. Hopefully it's not too far off. Is it only just a little bit? If it's just a little bit, then that's still okay. Okay, David said it's not a lot. Well, good. That's good. Now, when we needed to wait and figure out with the cameras, we suddenly realized that there needed to be some things downloaded, and that was always tricky because it takes time to download, and then sometimes you have to restart the whole computer. So to get a trim, so Aaron, welcome. So what does it mean to get a trim? Because I'm still learning some of these things. Does that mean like with the lag time? And how we can have things be a little bit more in sync? I'm assuming that that's what it's connected to. But I did find out that the thing to get is an ATEM, if that's how it's pronounced. I'm going to actually type it in. It's an ATEM Mini. And that is actually what we need to help with everything. With the performances, we focus a lot on the instruments because a lot of our storytellers are vocal, but it's even trickier when you have the instruments involved. And especially when you have something as varied from a flute all the way to a drum. So I know with David, we got to test out the drum and how that picked up. I actually was impressed that the instruments did still sound like instruments. There's been times when I've seen things and there's just something a little off or different about it. And there's also wanting to be able to start on time. We knew that we couldn't guarantee a certain time for a test day because that's the purpose of it, is to figure out how long does it take to set up. You know, what number do we need to put our box lights to? Right now, the lights that I have with the box lights are on 23. That was the lucky number that we used on the Friday, May 1st with the test. And then we also had to link up the sound, and David was kind enough to have his sound there to work with everything. So it was tricky. We had hoped to be having it air between 7:30 and 8 p.m. It was pushing more towards 8:20 p.m. when it came down to it. So we definitely appreciated everyone's patience with that. Any other comments from Jim, who saw the May 1st, or from David Sharp, you know, actually performing with it, with that experience? Okay, and welcome. So it's so Pascal. So welcome. And you said to buy at like an MBA. Is it like an app? Are you talking about an app? And yes, the lighting is nice. This is different than my normal office lights. These are actually the official professional ones, which we also used on Friday, May 1st. So that was really nice. But when it comes to the software, we use the OBS. Still in debate about Minicam. I don't know if any of you out there have used Minicam, but especially the idea of having banners and things that are put up on the screen, it might be nice to have. And so David's saying that it probably took about 40 minutes to set up, and you always want breathing space with that too. So in this situation, it might be about an hour. But even before a performer comes, there's just the general setup and making sure the tables and the computers are in their positions. But yes, we only had one computer last time with a double screen. And this time we're going to have 2 computers, and that should fix a lot of things. And right now I'm just working off my laptop. There was also some exciting things that happened today. I was actually videotaping a lot of youth and community tellers. So every year with Story Crossroads, we typically feature 15 professional story artists. And we had to adapt that a little bit. Hopefully we'll still be able to use all of them at some point before the next festival, even though we did say, hey, you'll still be that lineup in 2021. But what we did every year is have community and youth tellers. They feed in, usually from the different school districts, from the senior centers, and we wanted to still have them be part of it. But of course, when you're isolated, what do? Luckily, there's Zoom, and we're able to record them through Zoom. Now, the funny thing is, some of the people that I worked with today in the last few days, they didn't ever work with Zoom, so I had to do a little bit of a training. And then some of them were not even familiar with Wi-Fi. So for the first time, I'm proud to say I helped someone connect their Wi-Fi to a couple of their devices. And now, beyond what they've done for Story Crossroads, they will now have Wi-Fi to benefit them forever, or at least as long as Wi-Fi works. And we were able to record and be able to talk to them about if they could play around with their lighting. Now we have our box lights, and I said, you can still use office lights. Or do you have just some kind of portable lamp, something? What about those clip-on lights? So I kept trying to brainstorm if there were different things that they could use. Now it's amazing the difference that a device makes. And most of the time I was telling the storytellers to use a laptop if at all possible. A lot of times laptops have a built-in camera, and if they use an iPad or something like a phone, sometimes the lighting is really dark. We tested it with someone where they used their laptop and they used their iPad, and it was during the daytime. It was during the daytime, but it looked like night and day. There was a huge difference. So in the end, we chose the laptop over anything else. Otherwise, it looked like it was nighttime, and if a light was even shining on them, it looked like they were telling a ghost story with the flashlight. So we went that route for most of them. And luckily, we had amazing parents who were able to go along with my requests of, well, let's not have it in this room. Maybe we can have it on the couch, where it's not as busy looking in the background. And I'm really excited. We're going to premiere those particular ones at 11 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time on May 13th, 2020 through YouTube. Most things will be multi-streamed, but for that in particular one, that will be through YouTube. And when it comes to the other things that we're doing, we have the interactions with the oral traditional characters, and I know Jim is on here, and he will be helping to represent one of those characters. He's been telling me about a bunch of different research and history that he's been going through. Did you want to say a couple things about that, Jim? Can I make the lighting even brighter right now? I could, but then I might just be shocking, just be way too bright. I'll look like an angel, but I need to look more mortal. But yes, it's amazing how you can really play with the lights. But I kind of like the 23, unless maybe it looks darker for what you are looking on. And I know it's a bi-color, and I haven't really played around with anything else. I basically turned it on and kept it to the same settings that we used for Friday, May 1st. So that's a good question on that. There was also a bit of equipment that we decided to get, but we were unsure if we were going to use it or not, and that was the green screen. And when I brought it up with Sterling, our videographer, he said that when it comes to a green screen, it's a good idea for certain promotional things, like if you want the logo in the background. But if you're actually using it for performance, sometimes it's better to have the depth. So in my own home, we have a whole bunch of wooden cupboards, and he said that that would actually be better for the festival, but that the green screen would still be helpful for future things that we do for Story Crossroads. But we have it just in case. I do have to return a couple of the equipment that we used, which was the splitter and the shuttle. And eventually we will have that ATEM Mini, or what I had typed in there. Now, besides all of that, there's always all the other to-do things. Oh, and I'm going to read this from Jim here. It says, well, if you ask and mention angels, there are those who believe that elves are leftover angels. After the earth was created, they didn't need so many, and so we came down here. Possible we, that is elves, are needed to off-wet the other guys who were tossed out. Ah, see, you can tell that Jim's been doing his homework, because he's representing the shoemaker elf. So he definitely knows about elves. And now he's even connected them to the angels too, with what we were just talking about. Perfect. That was perfect, Jim. Going back to some of the countdown with Story Crossroads, we have grant deadlines. It's funny because you're planning and focusing on an event, but you have deadlines that are for the next year. So you have to always be thinking ahead. I know some people, they're wonderful with what they do, but they can only plan maybe a few months at a time. But there's not any way that Story Crossroads could do it a few months at a time. We actually have to plan a few years out. We actually know our lineups for the next couple years. We know some of our goals and what we want to do for the next couple years. And that's actually really important when you're writing grants. But I have to say, because there's countdown mode for this May 13th event, some of those deadlines can mix in with all of that and makes it crazy. Remember how Friday, May 1st, big day, big testing day? Well, we ended later than I was hoping, and it threw off the timing. I had worked on this a few days before. I had worked on it in the morning of that day, and I had 2 grants to turn in before midnight. And I was typing as fast as I could, and I had all this wonderful thing already gathered. But when it came down to it, I was able to turn in both of them, kind of. And I'm really curious of what that will mean in the end. It's not the first time that, yes, sadly, I have turned in grants very, very close to that deadline. And it always gets me because I know when the deadline is, and it's coming up. But life is crazy, and there's so many deadlines, and you're trying to play the balancing game and what to do. And in that situation, there was a repeat of something I had told this funder in the past. And I looked at the time. I knew that if I did not submit it by 11:59 p.m. of Friday, May 1st, it would not be accepted at all. But if I took a chance, maybe this grant would be considered. And there was this artistic merit part that I knew that I had completed in 2019, because a lot of things are postponed. I was actually applying for the same storyteller. And I said, please see 2019 application. And I clicked the submit, and it was 11:59 p.m. exactly. And I got the little thank you message that it was done. But then I wrote and sent in about 20 minutes later about, this is what I would have written, which is what I wrote before. And this is the exact application number, not just that it was 2019, but here's the exact application number in case they needed to double check. I have no idea if that will be accepted or not. And it just kills me if I can't make deadlines. And that's the thing, when you plan and you do all kinds of things, sometimes when you're juggling so many things, there's going to be balls that dropped. And this could have been one of those times. And it hurts me because I've always received a grant from this organization, and they have every right to say, you know what, you had a chance and you still at least turned in one of the two, because you're allowed to turn in two for this particular grant. So we shall see. It was something that happened. It wasn't like I started it that day. I did start things before that. It's just how life shook out that day. I do like seeing this little comment here from David. He actually talking about elves, especially since Jim is doing a lot of research with elves. But David looks like he knows a lot with elves too, and he's saying the elves, or oh boy, you're gonna have me pronounce this. It's spelled Tuatha and then space DE space capital DANNEN. So Tuatha De Danann. I think I really hurt the pronunciation of that. Were spirits that chose neither heaven nor hell. So they were bound to the earth alone, and it's a version that David's heard. Whoa. Man. Thing is, with our festival, we're only going to have 20 minutes delving into with elves and everything, and here we know we could have a whole day worth at least about elves. Oh, good. Here's a pronunciation guide. Thank you, David. Tuatha De Danann. I probably still made it sound really funny. Tuatha De Danann. Tuatha De Danann. Oh boy. If you ever need a tongue twister, there you go. Right there. Ha. Now, anyone have any questions or thoughts about preparing and getting ready for a festival? Right now, my big deadline is getting the arts education handouts out that we can put online, because that's been promised. We have virtual field trips. We have teachers. Doesn't mean that they're going to do that, but that's always wonderful to get those things out there that you promise. Now, Jim, you're saying, can you spell that word for me? Yeah, so I'll spell the original word. It's spelled Tuatha space lowercase de capital DANNEN. And in parentheses, David had mentioned fairies. So that would be fun. I can tell, Jim, you're going to look that up and you're going to know a lot of things. You might even be talking back and forth with David. Who knows? And have you ever encountered any elves? We may have encountered more elves than we have ever realized. Now, besides the May 13th event, talking about balancing, we've been balancing about the Big Why panel with historical storytelling meets humanities. And that is very exciting. Normally, when we have our live storytelling festival, we have our main day on Wednesday, and then on Thursday night, we tend to have a couple events that are geared more for teens and adults. It's a little bit more on the academic side, but we also have a performance. And we decided to bump this particular academic discussion into June. And we're going to have 4 professional storytellers who will discuss the why of historical storytelling. Because a lot of times we can learn how to do historical storytelling, but it's always fascinating to explore why that is happening and why we are drawn to that kind of thing. So at the same time as this, I have to plan things properly to promote the June 20th event. So I've been doing a lot of promo types of work, like a video that we finally put up on YouTube. And being that it's not quite the 1 month, but we're in that range where you want to start reminding people about another date that they want to put on their calendar. And that means we also are planning ahead. Even though we have this countdown for the festival, we're planning ahead when it comes to the August possibilities. And we are going to attempt to have a live house concert, but it has to be very limited because we have to watch the social distancing. We have to be careful about people wearing masks and such. So that gives us enough time to work that out. And we're also looking at a possible live, maybe virtual story camp for youth. And that would also be limited. So the house concerts would be limited to 18 people, and then myself and the performer. And the story camp would actually be something where it would be the youth, 15 youth, and 2 mentors, and that still is under the 20, which in the state of Utah, code orange, you're still allowed 20. But knowing that we can always go backwards with that code, we are also prepared if it needed to be virtual, if it needed to be something that was done through Zoom, for example. And having the parents realize that even though this is our original plan, here's our backup plan. It's kind of like when you have an outdoor event and you say, well, if this is going to happen, rain or shine. Or they might say, well, if it rains, this is now the plan. So it feels like with these codes, that's how we are adapting and working through things of what is the backup plan and what's the backup plan of the backup plan. And now that we've had some time to brainstorm and work through some of this, it's more possible to do these things. Any of you out there, kind of curious about those kinds of things or have comments about exploring even beyond spectacular, but going and planning for the future? Thinking about what that's going to mean for performing artists. I know that there was someone saying that they're going to miss mass gatherings. Like when will we really be able to mass gather? More and more I'm wondering, what does this mean for 2021? Even when writing grants, I've noticed I am writing at least a few lines that yes, we're aiming for live, but we will also consider and do virtual if we need to. And perhaps because we include that, it will draw more attention to the funders saying, well, look, they have a plan. They realize that they're going to move forward. Hopefully that things are live and you might say back to normal, but we already know that things won't be quite like that. I'm thinking we're going to have a portable sink or something where people can wash hands at any time. That might be one of those things. You'd think that usually for a festival you have to have sound or some of these basics, and now we have to look into, do you have a portable sink? My biggest thing is, what do you do about restrooms? I mean, for our test day, in case someone did, it would be, please wipe down and spray the disinfectant or something. But what do you do when you have more people? And so David is saying here, I think we'll see virtual performances take a larger and larger share of the venues. Now, I have to be wondering about venues. Usually we have the Murray City Park. That's outdoors. We can kind of space, and outdoors is in our favor. That's why even with future house concerts and the story camp, we're thinking outdoors whenever possible. But if you have a venue like our other venue, the South Jordan Community Center, that one usually could fit about 300 people, but with social distancing, you can't do that number anymore. You can't do 300. And you have to have at least 6 feet distance right now, at least, between household groups. There's been a lot of theaters that are worried because they have enough to, let's say, have 1,000, but they can't actually do 1,000 now. They might be lucky to do 180 to safely sit 180 people. I would suggest, if at all possible, that venues have movable chairs. Our place at the South Jordan Community Center, we have chairs that are movable. It's kind of like in a space that's used for many different things. The ballroom has been used by the senior center to play pickleball, or I think that's what they play. Something they play some kind of a sport thing, but then they also put out banquet tables out. So they have to have things movable. But there's so many theaters that don't have movable chairs. And as soon as possible, they're going to need to do that. But I'm more worried about the facilities. What do you do about if someone needs to go to the restroom? That, I don't know. I don't know if I would feel comfortable right now going to a public restroom. And if I'm not feeling that comfortable, how many people in the public are like that? So just being aware of how the general public feels and what is possible, and always having a virtual backup plan, but hoping that live could still happen. Yes, and what David says too, and ways to deal with crowds in excess of safe distancing limits. So what I'm thinking with house concerts, you have to have RSVPs required. For the story camp, you have to already know before you even start who will be there. I think gone is the way of walk-ins. It's all about appointments, very much appointments. So then when you're at capacity, it just has to end. And they couldn't do it the day of. I think probably what will happen is things have to end at midnight of the day before. And that's what you go with moving forward. But it's interesting. We have to think and be able to brainstorm ahead. We won't always be in code orange. We were in code red, now in code orange. We won't always be in code orange. And what does that mean for festivals? Festivals, we really have to brainstorm. And that's why we've done the best we can. And we're crash course learning. There was a lot of things that we needed to smooth out this past Friday, May 1st. But I really appreciate the camera people the videographers. I like the term videographer better. I really appreciate them working with us, trying to fit in our needs. Not everyone wants a split screen with American Sign Language, but it's important to us, and we're still working that out. This is the big thank you card. Last time I had a big thank you thing on a bright yellow paper, and I have another bright yellow paper. So here, I'm really appreciating these people. So we have Sterling Elliott, who, as I said, he's been with Story Crossroads from the beginning. And it's like he was there when Story Crossroads was born. And maybe that's why he's caring about Story Crossroads and how things are going. I just really love that he's been looking out for Story Crossroads. And then we had Alex there, and Lewis, and Tyler. And then right down on the bottom, I put Joshua because he's the one that knows Lewis and said, you know what, you don't have the right equipment, at least not all of it. I have what you need, and willing to then share it with us is just fantastic. So these are some amazing shout outs, and we're all learning together, and we're helping each other, because Joshua didn't have to share that, or Tyler, or all of them. They don't have to share some of these extra details, but they are, so that we can somehow have things happen. So yeah, like David said, they did good. They did good. They were very patient with me. There's nothing I really contributed on May 1st. I just was way as far as I could because of social distancing. I was like in the farthest corner I could be, while watching my little phone and texting the 3 people who are watching the 3 different platforms and double checking on things. And I think those people will be able to help me again this Friday. And if I'm lucky, maybe even David can help too. Can I convince you, David? Well, it would be so great because we've learned a ton. You'll love it. And the nice thing is, once you've done it once, everyone knows to wear masks. Everyone knows the procedure about washing hands once they come to my home. We know exactly where to put the lights now. Everything will be faster. Oh, good. See? David said sure. Make sure you talk to Carol. Yeah. Because we thought originally we'd have one test run. But things always take longer than you think. And so sometimes that also means you have another test run than you think. And it's important. There's no way. I'm so glad we're doing these tests. With a live storytelling festival, we have a different kind of test run that we would call microphone etiquette. And the Saturday before the festival, we would gather at the Murray City Park and we do like a do and do not of what, with microphones. And then we would have them test it out. So this is like our version of last year's microphone etiquette. And excited as I am, I have found myself grieving a little bit of some traditions that we usually do. One of the ones is when we have our out-of-state storytellers, we always encourage them to come the Sunday before the festival, because we're able to have them recognized by the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. And every single time we've gone to those concerts, they have been amazing. And I've always cried happy tears when that has happened. And we won't be able to do that tradition. I'm not sure even when the music and the spoken word will be kind of back to normal. I mean, Tabernacle Choir is quite the mass gathering in and of itself. I think we definitely need to be in code green before we can even do that tradition. So I found myself just kind of grieving some of the traditions that we've had through the years, and yet I'm celebrating what is happening. So any other comments or thoughts? Again, I'm really grateful to those who are watching the platform with our May 1st. So we had Jim, and he was watching Twitch, and we had Joanne, and she was watching YouTube, and then we had Lori, and she was watching Facebook, and it was wonderful. As soon as they would say something, I would yell it out to Sterling, and then they would play around. Oh, which reminds me, if you do happen to watch the test run, which is available through the Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube if you wanted to look for it yourself, we learned something that, see, our videographers are not used to the live streaming. Usually they're collecting and then it's going to be turned into something later. So a checklist that we realize we need to do is make sure that the videographers are having it turned off with their grids. They have sometimes special grids and special green glowy lights. See, I'm not technical. I just know something roughly. And these green glowy lights and the grids help when you're going to save it for later. But you can turn off that feature. So if you happen to watch the test run, you're like, wow, Carol is really sparkly. she's like really sparkly, or they're sparkly all over Dave. It's because you have to turn that off, and it's different when you live stream versus if you're collecting the video and you're going to do something with it later. So, yay! Lots of great things that we've been learning. Now I'm looking at the time, and I am going to share a story because I think it's that time to tell a story, unless, just really quick, if anyone had any last comments before I delve into a story. And I'm looking, and it's countdown. Do, 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 do. Okay. Now, most of the time, I tell folk tales, but this story actually jumped out at me today, and it involves my whole family, but I especially think of my dad with this particular story. I grew up in Wisconsin, And in Wisconsin, we do have winter. Now, winter is actually all over the world. But when people hear Wisconsin, they think, oh, you must have great winters. And we do, but we do have the other seasons. I always looked forward to those first snows when it would build up and it would cover everything in that blanket of white. And I knew that any moment that my dad would say, it's time to go sledding. Now, we had different kinds of sleds. We had the long plastic ones that we could jump into, but I really loved the sleds, the wooden sleds with the metal runners. But you had to have a special kind of snow for that. Well, on this particular day, all of us bundled up. There was my younger brother, there was my younger sister, and my mom and dad, and the five of us jumped in our van. We had the sleds all in the back, and we headed to the favorite park for sledding, Ridge Run. Now, Ridge Run is not the kind of park that has a ton of playground equipment. It's much more about the trails, and you can really get lost in those trails, but it's a good kind of lost where you're just surrounded by these trees and the leaves, and even in the wintertime with the bare branches, it just has a magical feel to it. But the hills there are many different kinds of hills at Ridge Run Park. Now, my mom and I, and especially my little sister, we liked the hills that went like, ah. But my dad and my brother, they loved what was only labeled as the hill. And that's how you would have to say it. You couldn't just say the hill. That would not be its name. It's the hill. Because when you went to the edge of it and you looked out and over, it was hard to see the bottom. It just kind of went whoo. And that was not the kind of experience that I wanted to have. But every time my brother and my dad would run up to me and says, come on, let's go down the hill. And every time I would stand up straight and I would fold my arms and I would shake my head, and to really, really emphasize the point, I would even sit down in the snow after all of that. I was not going to do it. Well, then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a bunch of teenagers. And they didn't have a long plastic sled. And they didn't have the wooden sled with the metal runners. They had a rowboat. They were carrying it all the way to the top of the hill. And one of the teenagers had a video camera and they set it up. And then all of them just ran for it and jumped into that rowboat. And that rowboat took off flying. And when I mean flying, I really do mean flying, because it was in the air. It was not touching the hill because it went like that. And then it just crashed, and I could hear the wood just creak and crack a bit, and it was zooming so fast down until it went farther than any sled, beyond any kind of markings that anyone had made, all the way to the pond that was frozen over. But when that rowboat hit that ice, it cracked, and the rowboat floated on that chilly water. I watched all this. I couldn't believe that it had really happened. But then I had an idea. And I turned to my dad and said, oh, Dad, let's go sledding in a rowboat. Yeah. But that's when my dad stood up tall and he folded his arms and he nodded his head. Rachel, there are things I would do, and there are things that I would not do. And going sledding in a rowboat down the hill is something I wouldn't do. And I thought about that. And when we drove back home after that sledding adventure, every so often that moment would pop up for me. And I wondered, anytime I came up upon something, was it really something that I need to do? Or would it be something that my dad wouldn't do, and thus maybe something I wouldn't do? And so to this day, I hang on to that wisdom. And so that is my story that I always like to end with. I always say that we can go to 9 to 10, but I always like to end with the story. So I feel like we'll end just a little bit early today. But I am grateful for you joining in and sharing your thoughts. And yes, thank you, David. Huzzah! And yes, clap, clap, clap. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. And look, I can tell a story that's personal. Usually I tell folk tales from around the world, but I really do love that moment. And I know it's not winter right now, but no matter what the season, it's good to think back what you would do and what you wouldn't do. Well, everybody, until we tell again.